run, click over here, custom, no, start video. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Maybe I'll sit over here, and if I find it,
So I can't hear it.
Hello.
Oops.
say hello.
Hi.
Ask him if he can hear you.
Yes, I can hear. Yeah.
We have a new computer, just trying to get organized here.
Oh, okay, great. What kind of computer did you get?
It's a new iMac.
Oh, great. Okay. I'm a Mac person myself.
Yes, I know. I've taken your classes.
Yeah, yeah. Hi, Brenda.
Good
How are
afternoon.
you, Scott?
Good, how are you?
Hello.
Hi, Jeannie.
Oh,
Hi, I'll get my camera in a minute. I'm just gonna go get some water.
Okay, no problem. That's a frosty background you got there, Brenda.
Trying to find this.
Okay, I'll give it a sec for Jeannie to get back.
If you want to make it bigger, but
Okay.
I'll sit here. Maybe I'll participate.
Okay. I will go ahead and get us started. All right. So welcome. This is a new class. You are here for the world premiere. So happy to have you here. I think I know most of you from previous classes, but my name's Scott, and I am going to give you a presentation today. I'm hoping we can have a little discussion on what interests you in photography and what you'd like to improve about any photography you're doing and things like that. So I'll probably take breaks periodically throughout here to answer questions and hear from you a little bit. This is going to be very visual. I'm experimenting a little bit with this, so bear with me, but I hope we can have some fun in this next hour. Okay, hopefully everybody can see my screen.
just a quick.
Yeah, sure. Question?
I'm not, Scott, I'm not seeing.
Who was that that asked that?
She got her mic on.
Okay.
Sounded like it, but
Well. Oh, I wonder if that must have been Brenda. Maybe she's gonna pop back in. I know she looked like she was having some connectivity issues, but okay, well, I'll go ahead and get a few housekeeping items out of the way. Okay, so welcome to this world premiere. A little bit about me. I live in the Washington, D.C. area, Silver Spring, Maryland, to be exact. And in addition to serving as a Get Setup guide, I am a photographer and writer. I do a little bit of freelance portrait photography, but I also really enjoy nature photography. That's my favorite style. And I am here because I really enjoy the interactive learning on Get Setup and love the community that we're building. Love to see some familiar faces and also meet new people. And if you are willing to be on camera, that would be great. It's great to see faces. And especially in a class this size, because it's small, it's nice to have that sort of social connection. We are recording this class, so you can email help@getsetup.io to get a copy of the recording. If you're joining by live stream, welcome. Happy to have you here. I would encourage you to participate with us in future classes. You can register for a class and then join in the conversation. And lastly, I don't think this is real relevant to this class, but Get Set Up is not paid to promote specific products. So if I do happen to mention a product here, it's not considered an endorsement. Okay. All right. So what I want to talk about today, I want to help you understand key terms and techniques. Some of these terms you may have heard of, some not. To know about we'll talk about the different genres in photography or different niches. I'm going to discuss how to take advantage of the environment around you to get the best results in your photos. Different niches. And then let me go back to that. And then we'll talk about developing your own style. So while I'm presenting, you might want to keep yourselves on mute just in case there's any kind of background noise, but I will stop and open things up for questions and dialogue. And if there's anything else you were hoping to learn today, I can stop right here for a minute and see if anybody had anything specific about photography that they were interested in finding out about. Or photo composition, I guess I should say, to be specific.
I'm just always looking for hints and techniques. I used to be really into photography back with film cameras, and I sort of got out of that. But a digital camera, the digital Rebel, when they first came out, was into that for a little bit, and then sort of faded away when it started to be harder to take cameras and lenses and everything on trips because of luggage requirements.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But I want to get back into it again.
Okay, great. Brenda, how about you?
I had to come in on my phone because my internet is unstable.
Oh, okay.
On my Mac. But anyway, I can't think of anything in particular.
Okay.
I do know about the rule of thirds, and I know you'll probably talk about that, but
talk about the rule of thirds. Yeah.
Yeah. Nothing is coming to mind, but thank you for asking.
Yeah, sure. Anybody else?
Cheryl, can you hear me? Hi. I'm in the same position as I think it was Jeannie. And in and out for years in film photography and all of that. And one of my that I'm not real familiar with is how to use the flash, I know how to use it, but I just need techniques to get the look that I want from that particular photograph. And sometimes when I use the flash, it might whiten the area. So I just need to learn how to fine tune the features that are on my cell phone. I use my cell phone mainly for.
Cheryl, you said you're using your cell phone for it?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, that's, before I forget that, I'm just going to answer that real quickly. Can you tell me what kind of phone you have? Is it an iPhone?
No, it's a Samsung. Samsung Galaxy 9.
Okay. Those take good pictures.
Yes.
Yeah, they take really nice pictures.
Yeah.
I will tell you, especially with smartphones, I am not a big fan of flash. And I try to, I don't know if the Galaxy has this. The latest iPhones have a night mode that comes on automatically when it senses low light, and then sort of keeps the shutter open a little longer to allow more light to come into the lens. So, that if your phone's equipped with that, that might be better. The flashes on the smartphones don't do the greatest job, and I'm never a big fan of flash
Yeah,
flashing faces and things like that.
it's
So,
too harsh.
yeah.
And I do have night mode, but I just never used it. So
Okay. Yeah.
anything that you can, like, I've got all of the features, but I haven't,
Okay.
used them,
Okay.
in the regular, when I
Right.
should use them.
Okay. Okay. Great. Well, let me get us started just talking a little bit about different types of photography. Of course, the world of photography is vast. There's landscape photography, and a lot of these overlap too. Landscape photographers, they may also incorporate some nature and wildlife into their photography. Other people just kind of focus exclusively on wildlife photography. There are architectural and real estate photographers who make a living doing that. Portrait photographers, I do a little bit of that as a side hustle. Some people like to take still lifes. Others are food photographers. In fact, that's a big business right now. A lot of restaurants want photographers to take pictures to put on their online menus, things like that. Travel photography, that is a hard one to really pinpoint because it could be a little bit of everything. But when I think of travel photography, I think of things that really bring out the location where you're traveling. Maybe the customs, if you're overseas someplace, anything like that. And then macro photography is just really magnified views of small things. So insects or small pieces of fruit or something like that. And I'm going to show examples of some of these. Landscape, you can have anything like this with a lot of color in it. I kind of count coastal shots as landscapes, at least for the purpose of this discussion. And so plenty of landscapes, plenty of landscape photographers out there. Ansel Adams kind of, I guess, sort of pioneered the whole black and white approach to it, but I really like the color shots myself. And then there is nature and wildlife, and that is a pretty broad area too. That can be flowers or wildflowers, I guess. A lot of animals, a lot of people focus only on birds. Birds are kind of challenging unless they're big shorebirds, but they're very easily frightened and fly off. Same with deer. Whales, it's fun to go on a whaling trip or whale watching trip and see them breach like that. There are these are examples of architectural photography. Some people like to take modern architecture, others do the more traditional buildings or classic buildings. And then there are portraits. And I teach a separate class that just started a couple of weeks ago on portrait photography. If you're interested in focusing really on that, I invite you to take that course. That's on the schedule on Get Set Up. But though portrait photographies can include child photography, it can include engagement photos, it can include family photos. So that is a fairly wide area too. And here are some examples of still lifes. And still lifes, that can be just about anything that's inanimate. So, everything from a baseball in a baseball glove to a musical instrument. A lot of people do just like they would with painting. They just try to capture just vases, flowers, fruit, things like that. You have lots in the way of food photography here. And it seems like most food photography is doing it very close up and sometimes even in a macro way. Travel photography, like I said, I kind of think of it as capturing the heart of the location, whether that's tangoing in Argentina or the windmills in Holland or something like that, local merchants. And then macro photography, which I've dabbled a little bit in. You can see you have to have special lenses for this to really magnify tiny things out there, whether that be sometimes people do it when they want to really get a close up of a flower Other times it's some kind of insect or even water droplets or something like that. So let's talk about lighting, because that's going to be one of the most important things. And I think Cheryl bringing up flash makes that really salient right now. But one thing to keep in mind when you're thinking about lighting, the light conditions in which you're shooting, is to try to look for even lighting most of the time, or even interesting background lighting. And sometimes that background lighting can be, maybe very, very uneven, or very, very sharp. I don't know what word I want to use, but sometimes sunset photos and things like that, those are great. But when you're shooting people or pets, or some objects in particular, you kind of want to have that even lighting, or something that allows some nice shadowing, but nothing really harsh, like the midday, like high noon sunshine can really be harsh on a lot of things like flowers and people. People are always squinting when they're getting their picture taken in the bright sunlight like that. So you can see here, I'm not a real fan of this picture. I just think it's kind of harsh and shadowy in an overkill type of way. This one to the right is a lot softer, a little more mellow. It's got some diffused lighting coming through the curtains here. And I think it's a little more, has a nice mood to it, I guess I would say. Here's another one where I think it was captured with a lot of shadow cast from sunlight coming in. There's really almost like too much shadow at work here in my mind. Whereas this is a little, I would have picked curtains rather than blind. Well, maybe these are curtains, I don't know, but they almost look like blinds. But the way that's sort of diffusing the light coming in, it makes it's a lot nicer effect on your subject, which is the flower there. Same here, when you're doing outdoor light shots like this is a street photograph. This isn't a horrible photo, the one on the left, but a lot of light and dark, and it just is kind of hard on the eye. Whereas this one here, yeah, it's a very overcast day, and overcast days can sometimes be really ideal times to take photos, especially urban shots. Sometimes I think they look kind of neat. But you've got that big cloud cover here, but everything is pretty much even in terms of its vividness and luminosity. So that's something to think about when you're shooting. Here's another example. These are some of my shots. This one I took at the National Zoo at a petting area for where they had barnyard animals. Really, I probably took this around noontime. Not really great. Here, I took this one this is in Iceland, and Iceland, it's cloudy most of the time, and that is a lot nicer of a photo. I was much happier with that one, and I think the cloudy day helped kind of keep the lighting softer on the horses. Here you can tell too, I really don't like midday sun on flowers. I don't think that creates a very nice effect on floral shots. Here it's a much evener. Just think this looks a little nicer. And then you get to here, which I think is, this photo's okay, but this one I like a lot better. It's even got a little bit of this light leak coming in. And that's taken obviously at sunset or late, not late evening, but early evening when the sun is starting to set. And it just adds some drama to the photo. It just is very eye-catching in that way. So that's why I like to shoot during what they call the magic hours, which those are early morning or in the evening. It just makes for much more dramatic lighting and photos that are really going to pop. So here is an example of a photo from Europe, some rural area of Europe. And this was at sunrise, and there's mist here. Just everything came together pretty well. But, you know, if I had taken this at, say, 8 or 9 o'clock when the sun was fully up, I wouldn't have gotten anything like this, and it wouldn't have been that interesting of a photo. But, you know, if you're not a early morning riser, this can be kind of a drag to get yourself up to take photos like this at sunrise, but there's always sunset. This is another sunrise shot at the Chesapeake Bay, kind of near where I live. Another one near the Chesapeake Bay, and you can see there's kind of this golden light coming in. And here's a nice, this isn't one of mine, this is another photographer, but nice shot at sunset. Portraits can be really nice when the evening comes. You get sort of this little bit of gold or orange in the background. And there's another beautiful shot at a late time of day. And of course, sometimes you may get lucky enough to get a shot like that. That is, and this is a stock photo, but I just want to give you an example of what you can achieve by kind of timing things right when you're going to shoot landscapes and things like that. So, okay. Talk about, well, before I do that, why don't I stop there for a sec and see if there are any questions about lighting. That is kind of one of the most important things to think about with photography. Did I give anybody bad news by saying you have to get up early to get some of those great lighting conditions?
I think there's multiple ways, right? Because I said I used to be into more of the photography part, and it was like you go out for those shots to look for those scenes. And a lot of the things that I've been doing more recently have been just, okay, I'm on vacation, there's landscape. Okay, I can't pick the magical hour because I'm tied to what I'm doing and where I'm going and whatever. But so I think that was very good information.
Yeah.
Question that I have is, especially the last photo, that stock photo. In any of those, were any filters used?
You know, for some of them, they may have been. I can tell you the two that I showed you that I shot, there were no filters.
Okay.
Yeah, it was just getting it right at the right time with the lighting the way it was. So now you can use filters to even dramatize the photos a lot more. And you can find those filters that still fit over lenses. I don't own too many filters anymore, other than a neutral density filter or two and a polarizer, which you can buy at what few camera stores that are still around, but I'm sure you can order them on Amazon. But also you can do that in the editing phase too.
Okay.
You know, you can do, they call them filters or looks, but you can just apply those afterward. So,
Okay.
Okay. So one thing that, this is another term you may have heard of. I haven't gotten to the rule of thirds yet, but this is depth of field. That's the difference between the nearest and farthest objects in your photo. And when you've got a really shallow depth of field, that means that you're really hyper focused on the subject of your photo, and the area, as you get further away from that subject, everything starts to blur out. And that's a nice effect to get. It puts all the more emphasis on your subject. Here is an example of a wide depth of field, meaning, you know, they weren't really trying to concentrate on, well, I don't want to get into aperture settings and all that because that gets a little too complicated, especially if you're taking a lot of your photos on a smartphone. But if you have a smartphone that has the portrait mode, this is really an easy effect to get just using that. if you don't have the portrait mode on your phone, there are some apps that you can apply that will do this for you. And if you're using a digital camera, if you're using automatic settings, they usually have a portrait mode in the automatic settings. And I'm not going to have time to get into what kind of settings you would need to do this on manual if you've got a digital camera, but it's nice to think about depth of field. Here you can see another example of a wide depth of field, and here's a very narrow one. Getting these bokeh looks with the lighting and everything in the back is always really nice. Here's one that I took of my niece. I shot one with the wide depth of field, and I shot this with an iPhone, and then I used the portrait mode on my phone and took this one and got a much nicer background like that. Here's another example, wide, shallow, and same thing here. Okay, so Brenda, now we get to the rule of thirds. And when I'm talking about the rule of thirds, that is one of the first things you learn in a photography course. And I had a little bit of a hard time getting my head around it when I took a photography course for the first time about 20 years ago. But what you're really talking about is breaking your image into thirds, both horizontally and vertically, and you're creating kind of a 9-part grid like that. And on a lot of phones, you can set that. There is a setting on in your camera settings for your phone that will actually set up a grid for you. This is really good for doing things like lining up the horizon in a landscape to make sure it's straight. It also helps, though, with sort of positioning your subjects in the frame in the way you want to do that. And you can see here's another example of using that grid to get an effect like this. So one thing that this helps with is to keep yourself, to some extent, from putting your subject right smack dab in the middle of the frame, which we all kind of intuitively want to do. But it oftentimes makes for a much more interesting picture. And this kind of marks the difference between somebody who's a skilled photographer and somebody who's really just taken a snapshot. When you have your subject off center a little bit, you don't have to do this every time, but a lot of I do it more than not myself. That's part of my style, I guess. But here you've got this lighthouse and you've got all this negative space. Now, I really like this photo. I just think it's really simple, but really pretty. And, there's sort of a gradient in the sky there, but, that's all there is to it. And the lighthouse and then the ice. And don't be afraid of having a lot of negative space in a photo. Here's another example of applying the rule of thirds, and there's another one. I mean, look at all this there, but your eye is drawn immediately to the dog anyway. So, and even when you're doing sort of a portrait orientation or a vertical orientation with a photo, you can still apply this, as you can see here with these. But you can always center it too. There are plenty of times where that is perfectly fine. It's really nice for nature and close-up shots, really real close-ups of florals, flowers, lilies, things like that. Wildlife, a lot of times, especially with wildlife, a lot of times an animal is not sitting still waiting for you to take the shot, right? You've got to sort of get what you can as fast as you can, because they move sometimes pretty quickly. So you don't have a whole lot of time to adjust your focus or anything like that to to line up and apply that rule of thirds. So getting it right in the center is fine. And you'll see a lot of really great wildlife photography that has the subject right in the center of the frame. And one other way of sort of working with the center of the frame is look for leading lines. So these roadway shots like this is kind of interesting. It's just leading the eye right up to the horizon. It's smack dab in the center of the frame. That can be a cool type of approach. You can do that with even tall buildings like a skyscraper. Again, these lines are leading up and hit right in the center of the frame. And then you've got curves and bends and spirals that are always very captivating in a picture. This highway shot is pretty interesting, the way this bends very sharply. And paths are good for something like this, alleyways, you name it. Just you want to kind of keep your eye out for shapes of some sort. Anything angular or sort of curved or anything like that. I love to take spiral staircase shots. And you can find these, you know, at all kinds of places. And the other thing that you want to think about sometimes when you're taking shots, especially landscapes, to look for really interesting objects in the foreground to include in the composition. Take this shot, for example, these rocks up here, they're very shadowy, kind of have a somewhat smooth texture to them. So you're getting a little bit of a texture feel in the foreground, and you're still getting the sunset in the background and the crashing waves. Just much more interesting than just standing right at the edge of the beach and just shooting out into the ocean. Yeah, you might get that sunset, but this is a lot more interesting. Same here, a lot of wildflowers. Somebody could have just focused in and just gotten maybe just a little bit of this in the mountain range, but doing something like this, could be that the person even crouched down a little when they took the shot, but that is much richer of a photo. And sometimes you can even do this with you don't even have to have the objects in the foreground in focus. This one's interesting. It's people sort of on a ferry, I would imagine, maybe as they're seeing the Statue of Liberty. And they're all out of focus. The focus is right on the object of their interest, which is the statue itself. But this is kind of an interesting approach. Another thing to be keep your eye out for is seeing when you can create a sense of scale. This isn't going to happen all the time, but getting a contrast in size is within the context can be really incredible. So here you can see, if I had just zoomed, well, I didn't take this, but if I had just zoomed in, or the photographer had just zoomed in on the animals themselves, I'm not quite sure what those are, rams or something. But if they had just zoomed in on the animals, that would have been okay. But chances are there wouldn't be much background to see. Here you can really see, and this is great if you don't have a zoom lens, especially, you can see just how big the range is that they are grazing in. This is one I shot at Yosemite National Park a few years ago, and I don't know if you can even see him, the climber way down here, trying to climb that rock. And here's another good example, just waterway where people are kayaking, and there's this huge mountain range behind them. One other thing that you can use all the time, I mean, this is one that's very easy to do, is just filling the frame. And that means the entire frame is just filled up with your subject. You don't have to have any background or anything like that. This works well in a lot of the easiest examples for when this really works well is when you've got just a pile of something, say flowers, or you've got stones like this. You can do that with things like these little tiny pumpkins or gourds. Here's one I took several years ago in Monterey, California. I just stood over the sea lions and pretty much filled the frame just with them. And you can even do that with a living thing, like a cat or a dog or some other kind of animal. I've seen a lot of lion pictures where they've done this, where you just fill the entire frame with the face. And another approach is to think about getting a frame within a frame like that. In this case, here on the left, you've got more of a circular type of frame around this scene. But that adds I think that makes it a lot more interesting than just having the bike leaning against the building or the door, wherever, window, I guess it is. Same here, you've got the entryway kind of serving as the frame into this little garden area. Sometimes that frame can be circular, so you can be shooting through a pipe or something like that to get an interesting landscape shot. You can do it with portraits like this. And you can even do it with things like plants, have them frame somebody's face, or blankets, all kinds of, it's just a matter of getting creative with how you want to work that. Okay, I'm going to stop there for a second and open it up for questions and also thoughts about anything I went over.
Hi, Scott. This is Brenda.
Yeah. Hi, Brenda.
Hi. I can't figure out how to put my hand up on the phone thing. But anyway, I do have a question. When you
Okay.
were talking about sense of scale, I've been trying, we are right on Lake Michigan and
Yeah.
the town is. I cannot create a sense of scale or how high I am or how high the bluffs are. And I can't go down to the bottom. So I can't go down to the bottom and shoot up. How is there a trick when you're standing at the highest point to try to, because right below is the lake and hopefully the beach, but a lot of
Yeah.
that's gone. How do you do that?
Some of that is opportunity. You just have to be in the right position to do it. Other times you just have to keep your eye out for some kind of object or person or animal or something like that that can really show that difference in scale or size. So
Right.
that may be the way to do it, even if you're shooting from above. Maybe if you're seeing something down there like a wading bird or something like that. Yeah, it's hard for me to really say, not being able to
Yeah.
quite picture your location,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
sometimes it's just looking for an object or a moving living being
hmm
that looks very tiny in the larger scale of
Right.
what you're seeing through the viewfinder. So yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay. Thank you.
I would look at a lot of pictures like that. I think if you go to like travel magazines or things like that, or just go and do a search on Google Images or Pixabay, which is a free stock art, or even Getty for that matter.
Oh, mhm.
Just kind of, stroll through those, and it might give you and do search terms that might apply, like mountain ranges or kayaking. I found that one shot just by doing a search for kayaking and found a shot like that. So yeah, if you look around there, you'll probably see some really good, it'll probably spark some ideas for you.
Right.
on how you can
Okay,
apply
thanks.
that.
Yeah.
And yes, I saw Pat had her hand up. Yeah.
Do you think it has a lot to do with your own personal artistic eye
Yeah.
and seeing that?
Mhm.
And is that something you can train yourself to do just by the lighting and the spacing? And
Well, there are certain techniques that you can train yourself to do, but I think you raise a good point, and that is you are the artist here. So, I even don't like to say the rule of thirds because it makes it sound like you have to do that every time, and you don't. There are plenty of people who take beautiful photos that are very symmetrical or very centered, things like that. So all of these things are nice techniques to apply, but as you develop your own personal style, if you're really going to get into photography, you can kind of decide how you want to approach that. And whether you want to do more central type photos, or maybe if you're doing food photography or something like that, you want to try macro to take those photos, which means you got to invest in a macro lens. But you could also maybe try the rule of thirds and put, say, like I showed you, a cup of cappuccino on a table and have the cappuccino sort of sitting on the far right or far left.
do you recommend practicing, each, like, let's say the rule, quote unquote, of thirds, or the scale or the viewpoint? Do you recommend practicing that till you get it perfected?
Yeah.
Rather than jumping around?
Well, I think it's a happy medium.
You have to capture the moment, I
If
imagine.
that makes sense. I think you can, and I will go through phases. One of my problems, I will admit, is that I've never been able to really force myself to specialize in anything. I just kind of play around with something and then move on to something else. I've never been a strict portrait photographer, never a strict landscape photographer, which is why I'm probably still, for the most part, just an amateur. But I think you can for starters, you can experiment around with a bunch of different approaches and see what kind of results you get and see what you like, and then start making some decisions from there on what you want to really practice and hone as a talent.
I imagine it's when the opportunity arises. If you see something that's a line or in thirds, is good for thirds.
Right.
What I found good too is with when I started with the digital camera, I got the Reb, which was comparable to a 35 millimeter film camera. But the fact that you don't have to waste film, you can sit there and shoot the same scene multiple times in multiple different ways and see what you like.
I've tried that, but you never know when you look at the pictures. Now, what setting was that? Or
Oh, you can. You know what? There's and I'm sure this is out of scope of this class, but if you bring it into when I would bring the photos onto the computer, you could see this. There's a way to see what the settings are and what you did.
Yeah, that's the metadata in the photo, and depending on where you save it, there are different ways to access that, but that metadata will contain like the date that the photo was taken and the settings on the camera that you used when you shot it, things like that. So,
because I went straight from a completely manual 35 millimeter camera to something that had settings and programs and stuff like that. And I had no idea what it was going to do. So when I got the camera, I would go out and I do a lot more landscape. I would go out and do landscape, flowers, whatever. And I would just, so they're okay. Twist the dial, try this one, try this one, try this one, see what it was doing.
Yeah. One thing that when in the days of film photography, and I did this, is they would talk about bracketing. And bracketing would be you try taking a shot at sort of 3 different exposures, hoping that one of those would turn out right. And you don't really have to do that anymore. Number one, especially with smartphones, they kind of compensate for lighting problems a little bit more and things like that. I mean, they're called smartphones for a reason, I guess. And you can even use the HDR settings to get really sharp pictures that you take with your phone. Yeah, I still have not completely gotten out of that mode. So I'm still taking a shot, looking, and then taking a shot again, and taking 10 shots of the same thing, even when it's standing still. So hard habits to get out of.
Professional.
Yeah. How about you, Cheryl? Is this
I was just
generating any
laughing
ideas,
at when you were saying you just keep taking pictures, because I'm old school. I used to do the film developing and all of that, but for some reason I just can't trust the camera. So
Yeah.
I'll take like 10 or 15 shots of the same thing, and then I'll go through and weed through, and they're all the same, and then I have to, figure out which one I want to use, but I'm just not as comfortable with really believing what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
When I take a shot, that's why I was laughing.
Oh, you're my kindred spirit thing. Because it's like, been the hardest thing for me to break that habit, because especially, I'm storing all my photos. I'll put them either in Lightroom or back them up on like Google Photos. And I even teach a class on Google Photos and backing up photos on that platform. And I'll have all these photos in a row, and somebody will say, well, I guess it doesn't take out duplicates. And I say, those aren't duplicates. Those are separate shots. So
I hear you.
Yeah.
And I'm filling up my Google bank, so I have to go through and delete all of that.
Yeah. How about others? Any thoughts on what kind of photography you might want to do or that you like to do?
One thing that I'm doing a lot more, older and all, and I'm trying to capture, family get-togethers, and everybody's moving around, and I try to make candid shots.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's come out as like a regular photograph, not unless I stop them and tell them, sit here, pose here, turn your head this way, but is there any tips that you have that, besides the framing and all of that? It's kind of hard to do when you're in a big setting with a lot of people around.
Yeah.
Tips on how to get good photos.
I had that same question, how to get people's attention. So when you take a group shot, somebody's not looking to the left and right and up and, on the back of somebody's head.
Right. Well, yeah. So they're sort of like two different approaches. I think Pat's talking about posed photos, and Cheryl, it sounds like you're talking about the candid shots. So
candid shots. That's what I like. I like candid shots.
Yeah.
And just how to do that.
Yeah, and I love taking candid shots. I especially love taking candid shots of kids, and that can be really challenging because they really move. But a lot of photographers will confess, some of them may not want to do this, but that it's a matter of numbers and just shoot,
that's what,
waiting to get that one shot that's going to turn out.
Yeah.
And because they're moving so fast, sometimes I even with people, and especially at an event, I will put my camera into burst mode and almost like I'm trying to shoot sports or something like that.
Okay.
And You know, Pat, that's something that might even work with a posed group shot. So that if somebody moves their head slightly or looks away for just a second, or there are always shots where you've got a group and somebody blinks.
Yeah.
And if you are using that multiple shots simultaneously in quick succession, chances are one of those is going to turn out okay. So at least one, probably more. But that's just the approach I've been taking with situations like that. I'm sorry, Pat.
This is
Cheryl, I'm
Cheryl.
not hearing you. Yeah, sorry.
I said, and one thing is when you have all of those burst shots, they will fill up your memory. So delete that stuff. Always remember to delete it.
Yeah, they will.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can testify to that. Yeah. Other questions? Matt, I will tell you, if you are interested in getting into more exploring more specialties in photography, we are developing a lot of classes focused on specific areas of photography, like landscape photography and some techniques there, nature, wildlife photography, you know, how to really capture animals when they aren't going to hold still for you, things like that. So those are in the works. So if you're interested in those, keep an eye out for those. And we already have that portrait photography class that goes really into a lot of techniques for capturing both candid photos that are really nice and also pose shots, things like that. Yeah. But oh, well, I appreciate everybody being here for this debut. Just a few other techniques I listed here that you might want to consider. You know, sometimes, and this isn't easy, I can't do this nearly the way I used to, but sometimes shooting from a lower position and shooting up, like crouching and shooting upward, even if you're taking a picture of a person, that can be an interesting angle to try to use. You could shoot, say, from if somebody's up on a balcony or at the top of a stairs, you can shoot that way. Just another approach to take. Long exposures are sometimes fun to do to create a sense of movement. Sometimes you can do that with people. You see moving water. People do that all the time. They set their camera to keep the shutter open for an extended period, and the water falling down is going to look really blurry, and it's a nice effect to get. And then lastly, just break some rules too. Everything I've told you here, these are just some techniques that are tried and true that you can try out, but you know, artistry is should not be bound by any conventions. So if you want to try something different, just go ahead and experiment. So just as takeaways, you want to always be aware of lighting and try to make the most of shadows, light streaming into windows. That's with indoor photography. Look for even lighting outside. Shade, overcast days are good for that. And best time to take outdoor photographs is morning or evening. Remember that rule of thirds and try positioning your subjects off center. Look for those leading lines and bends and curves. You can always fill the frame with something if you want, and keep your depth of field in mind too. Okay, and I'll just tell you a little bit about some related classes, but before I do that, if you end up taking some pictures where you apply some of these techniques we talk about, or if you just really like the class, would love for you to share that with people. You can share that on social media and give us a shout out. Our hashtag is #GetSetUp, and you can visit our Facebook page too. It's @GetSetUp. And you can always share it with Liz, who's on our marketing team, and she is always looking for people in our learning community who are really learning and applying some great things from what they've picked up in our classes. So feel free to reach out to her sometime. She may want to feature you on our Facebook page or in our blog, but that's always welcome. So related classes, we have one coming up on an introduction to Instagram. If you are interested in sharing some of your photos, that one is sort of designed for people in a different time zone. It's at 11 o'clock tonight, but if you're a night owl, that might be one to check out. There is a class on looking like a superstar on Zoom. That's just adjusting the settings so you might look a little younger or something like that. And then there is one on how to have
Want that one?
What's that?
We all want that one.
Yeah. You know, I have to admit, I've tried that a couple of times and it makes me look really airbrushed. So, yeah, I don't know. But yeah, and then there's one on having fun with Snapchat, which is another photography app you may have heard of. My next classes, I do some tech classes too. So tomorrow I'm teaching one on just the basics of the iPhone, just some basic settings you might not be aware of that can really make using the phone a little easier. And then on Saturday morning, I've got a class on creating your own brochures and flyers and signs, business cards, things like that, using some online platforms that are really easy for designing things like this. So you'll be getting the class notes here and you'll be getting the takeaways I mentioned, plus some other class suggestions. You can click here to view the schedule of all upcoming classes. You can click here to give some feedback about the class. You can rate both me as the guide and rate the class. Again, this was a brand new class, so we would really love to know what you thought about it, what might improve it, what you think was really bad about it if you didn't like it. Anything that you can offer us that could help us improve this. And lastly, you can always drop in here at the end of that feedback form any suggestions for other classes that you would really be interested in having us offer. We're constantly looking for new content and we get a lot of our ideas from you in the learner community. And you can also drop those ideas off at help@getsetup.io. And I also invite you, if you're interested in hosting an interest group, maybe you want to host just a discussion group about photography or something like that, you can let us know also through that email address. And lastly, I hope you can spread the word about learning with Get Set Up to friends who you think might enjoy our classes. We are growing fast and we really like bringing more and more people into this learning community. And lastly, I faked you out with that earlier, lastly, I think. But lastly, we do have a class to help you navigate through what you may have noticed is a new look and feel to the Get Set Up website. So if you're having trouble finding your way around with some of the new rearranging in the real estate, you can take that. I think Marv on our team is offering that every day. So feel free to drop in on that one. Okay. Well, I hope this was fun. I really enjoyed talking with you all and spending some time talking about this. This is my passion. So this was great.
Yeah, it was fun. It was good. You know, because I keep hearing, everybody keeps talking about just using their phone as their camera now.
Yeah.
And I'm old school that, you know, like I said, I went from the digital to the film to the digital, and I have a newer DSLR than the first one. But you know, when I've gone on vacations, I've ended up going out and I've bought point and shoots for it that has the extended zoom, because you don't get that with a cell phone.
Right.
But I find I'm using my cell phone camera a lot more because they are a lot better than they used to be.
Yeah.
And it's not just, okay, let me just take just a casual picture. Let me just try to take a picture because I don't have a camera with me. So I want
Yeah.
to try to experiment with some of this stuff. I think this was very helpful and
Yeah.
useful for what I want to get out of it.
Oh, great. And I can tell you, Jeannie, I am doing the same thing. I'm more and more just whipping out my cell phone or my smartphone and taking my pictures on those.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I
Because
went on
it's
a
so
cruise-
easy.
When I went on a cruise, I didn't want to take my cell phone out with me because I didn't want to risk turning the data on because it would be international and it
Oh,
cost.
yeah.
I
Oh,
didn't want to
yeah.
risk losing it. So, but it was hard to find a decent point and shoot camera that was small enough to fit in your pocket that,
Yeah.
but
And
I
nobody knows how to use them. You hand it to somebody to take your
Yeah.
photos. And,
Yeah.
well, they
That's
look at
true.
it, especially the younger generation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So many people said, why are you buying another camera to take on your trip? Well,
And you gotta
one was I wanted a waterproof camera too, because I was going snorkeling. So that
Oh,
was,
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, Jeannie, I'm going to have to talk to you sometime about that because that's something I've always wanted to try is underwater photography. I never have.
that nothing came out really that great, but yeah, no, I'd love to. It just, I've got memories from it, so I wouldn't call, they're not something I can print and hang up on the wall. That's for sure.
Yeah,
But-
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, listen, everybody, I hope you have a great evening. I really enjoyed this and I hope to see you at other classes soon.
Okay.
You will.
Great.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Scott.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great
All right.
class.
Take
Bye.
care, everybody.
I appreciated everyone's questions too. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did too.
Okay. Take care, everybody.